Hi there, my name's Mark and welcome to the Budapest Chronicles. This is the first of several chapters of my life and experiences in Budapest. A step out of the norm, certainly at the time I came over here, which was the end of '96. So you can kind of get the time span involved in that. And certainly at a time when Central Europe wasn't really a considered option for too many people in terms of going to live or travel or work even. This was way prior to, cheap travel or hotel accommodation, Airbnb and all the the apps that are available now. This was really, quite an adventure then. An adventure that was within easy access rather than, Central America or South America or Africa or somewhere like that. I mean, this was kind of an untapped area in the middle of Europe, and that's why it appealed to me so much. The culture, the history, the architecture. Anyway, so behind me is the first building that I came into contact with upon arrival in Budapest one dark October evening at the end of '96. And this is kind of an old Renaissance Baroque style building that just happened to be there and happened to have a room for, I think, 5 nights in the heart of Budapest. And I'm going to show you how close it is to everything in a little while. But I wanted just to sort of landmark this building because really, if you can just imagine for a minute dropping everything that you're used to and kind of making a shift, a change in life to an area that apps that you have no connection with, you probably actually know very little about, and to arrive in this country where the language alone is a challenge, gives you an idea of the backdrop of this. So this building is right next to the big market, which you can see right here. I'm pointing to just over here. And this big market place, you get all the fresh vegetables, clothing, that sort of thing. Very Central Europe economy based at the time. Just a lot of similar things on sale. But as I'm going to show you, what a building. But when I arrived here, this was a fairly basic setup. Not too many options, as you can see right now, as I'm going to show you. So you have the big market there, you can see. And just going to avoid the people here a little bit. And you've got, as you can see, a few eating options. But then if you look over the road, and literally over the road, you can see the Parliament and the Danube. So we are literally in the heart of Budapest here. And you can also see the metro or the underground line right there. And this is pretty much as it was in 1996. So kind of an exciting situation. Very little around me in terms of, modern amenities, but at the same time, it wasn't that basic, and enough for it to be an adventure. And again, of course, I didn't know anybody. It was dark when I arrived and cold. So it was all set up for a nice kind of, I suppose, like espionage, thriller, John le Carré type backdrop. There's a fire engine going past. Never a dull moment here. Anyway, so as you can see, quite a backdrop, and this is where it all began for me. Now I just wanted to sort of paint that picture for you, and now I'm going to paint it a little bit in a bit more detail for you, because I didn't just come here to sample a different culture. It was kind of a situation in my life. I would say 30, very early 30s, and I'd done a lot already at this stage, and not just in terms of life, but quite a lot in terms of my career. But I was just literally, very flat with it all. I think I'd consumed and, lived a fairly heavy life in terms of consumption, I mean, fairly early on. So I was almost ready for something a little bit more radical, something to sort of change my outlook a little bit. And the opportunity to do this presented itself in a very strange way. In my first video, I kind of introduced the idea of me looking at working overseas. And one of those options was to go to South Africa, which to me was, an incredibly exciting opportunity. But the timing of everything is really important. And the timing to go to Johannesburg, as the option was at the time, was dangerous because of the apartheid situation. And as I'm walking past some bars, I thought I'd just put those up there now, because the guy at the office that I was speaking to said, we'd love you to come, but to be perfectly honest with you right now, if you did come to South Africa, you'd probably be spending most of your time, behind those things. And of course that put me off a little bit. But it's not so much the adventure, it's where you are in life. And we're all built differently. We all have different drivers, different sensitivities, different goals, ambitions. But for me, movement and the idea of seeing, experiencing new things, different things, was very, very important to me at the time. And to a certain degree, it still is. It's part of my DNA, it's part of my nature. And I accepted this part of me, and it's important that I sort of document all of this for my own, my own memory bank, but at the same time to try and help share some insights, because I've met a lot of people that have always said to me, I wish I'd travelled, or I wish I did this, or I wish I'd done that. And one of the things that I have learned in life, but not fully, to be honest with you, but one of the things I have learned is that you've got to do. Because if you don't, you live in your head. And if you live in your head, you're not going to really experience anything. It's just going to be your imagination. So I had a good job in London, a lovely girlfriend, a good lifestyle. But it just wasn't it wasn't doing it for me anymore. And I had to push myself. And I really did push myself. This is one of the reasons I'm making this, is a reflection, because if you push yourself a little bit, what's the worst that can happen? It could be a bad experience. You learn from it. You return with, with your tail between your knees and you say, well, I've got to try again. Or, you get something from it. And for me, it was the second category, because I knew that if I didn't make a shift, I would be starting to suffer. And if I started to suffer, of course, those around me would also do that. And I just didn't see the point. But the opportunity comes. There's a saying, when the student's ready, the teacher presents himself or appears. And I was ready. I was really ready. And I'd investigated the South Africa opportunity, and as I said, it wasn't the right one for me at the time. What did happen, though, was I started to investigate other options, because it became very apparent that was the thing I had to do. And because I was working in publishing at the time, I got access to a lot of different magazines and journals and things, and I found some very interesting insights into working in my area, which was media at the time anyway, overseas. And it was during that time that I'd read an article about Budapest and the emerging Central European market. And the article covered a couple of people who were working over there, and I decided to get in touch with them. I knew them vaguely, and I made contact with them. And I got a lot of information and some contacts and some, you know, places to visit, etc., people to visit too. So with that in mind, one of them suggested, why don't you just buy a flight, come out for a period of time and just have a look. And that's how the story began. But what makes it especially interesting, and it gives you a little bit more of an insight of when you're doing something right, you know, the opportunities suddenly present themselves. I'd made the decision, I'd bought the flight, I'd found this place I just showed you as a relatively cheap option to spend 5 nights in central Budapest, without it being, you know, as I said, a hotel scenario, which I don't know, I just fancied a little bit more of an adventure than that. And this was that for sure. But anyway, once I'd bought the flight, got my accommodation, and made the mental shift to do this, a friend of mine rang me and said, have you seen the London Evening Standard? And I said, no, I hadn't. So she said, go and buy it and go to page 35. I don't remember the page number. And sure enough, I got the paper. And in a box ad, which is one of these little box advertisements in the newspaper, there was a job ad for publishing director opportunity Budapest. Now, the likelihood of that happening is gazillion to 1, because these things just aren't going to be promoted in a London newspaper. So of course I grabbed the paper, ran back to my place and made contact with the organisation, and of course they were delighted to hear from me. It all made lots of sense, and we set up that was my first specific appointment whilst I was in Budapest. And it was incredible, because it was that kind of job in the kind of situation that just appealed to me. And what's more, to make it even more significant, this building, one of the reasons it also appealed to me was in this kind of old ghetto area in Budapest, which I'll take you to in one of my next videos. And the atmosphere in this area was like going into some kind of 1930s black and white, thriller, espionage, kind of art movie type thing. And I just loved the kind of feel of it. Anyway, to cut a reasonably long story short, that particular job offer was made within about 5 minutes of me being there. I had what they wanted, they had what I wanted. I didn't really need to see anybody else. The whole trip, I met some new friends. I got a feel for the city, and everything was, set in place for, the start of something new. So I'm going to leave you with that right now, as I kind of just angle the camera into this sort of district that I was staying in when I first arrived. And I'm going to share how the adventure unravels as we go along. So I do hope you'll stick along for the journey. And of course, that there are some insights that you can relate to or connect with or get something from. And I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.